Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure for DSN to host this very important community event tonight. Let me first of all say thank you to the leaders of our community schools and yeshivot here on the Jersey Shore. We are very proud of the education you are providing to our children. As an Orthodox Jewish community, we know that sending our children for a dual Hebrew and secular education is critical. We also know that we want the best education possible to allow our children to lead fulfilling and successful lives. The flip side, of course, is we accept upon ourselves the burden of tuition. In my role at DSN, I have countless conversations with community members about the effects that burden has on our lives. Recently, I have learned about an organization that has a plan to lessen that burden, perhaps significantly. In speaking with Ralph Hannon, he explained to me exactly what Teach NJ is doing and what they plan to do. I was immediately amazed and attracted to the plan. In my opinion, it is completely realistic. I keep thinking, if only Teach NJ had been around 21 years ago when my oldest child entered yeshiva, how much money could I have possibly saved? If you have children or grandchildren, you need to pay attention to the speakers tonight. Nobody benefits more than you. There is no catch. There is no sketch. This is the real deal, and it can have a dramatic impact on you and your family. At this time, I'd like to introduce to you an esteemed member of our community, a strong advocate for making tuition affordable, and an executive member of Teach NJ, Mr. Ralph Hannon.
Thank you. Nobody ever called me esteemed before. Can you say that again? Thank you guys, first of all, for all coming here again. My name is Ralph Hannon. I've moved here to Deal about 6 years ago after growing up here and taking an intermission to Brooklyn and seeing really what a mess their tuition situation is. But to give them some credit, they started ahead of us in figuring out ways to lobby the government in order to get more funding. And they started pretty successfully. And I have here the founder of the Teach Coalition movement, Maury, who will speak a little bit about what he's done nationally in a little bit. But when I moved here, I noticed that nobody was doing what they were doing in New York. So through Sammy Saka, I hooked up with Maury, and we got into lobbying the government pretty quickly. We have a few different things that we do to get money into our schools. What we do specifically is advocate for all non-public schools in the state. Right now, we pay some of the highest property taxes in the country in New Jersey. We don't utilize any of the public school opportunities that are out there, and most of our tax burden goes to. So what we do is try and get some of our elected officials to see that what we're doing is actually taking a lot of the burden off of their public school system. We're paying full taxes, but we're not benefiting in the ways that we think are fair in getting parity for our children the same way that public school children get. Obviously, this is a private school, and with private schools, you're going to have to come out of pocket. The state is not going to cover your full tuition bill for you to go to private school. But what they will do is subsidize things like security funding. So if you've been around Hillel's campus recently, you notice how many security guards we have, how many cameras, we have a barrier at the gate, we have a full array of different things that are helping keep us secure, and we're not paying for all those things. So while we have a small security fee that's tied to our tuition bills, a big portion of that stuff is getting paid for directly by the state. Same thing with a portion of our nursing, a portion of our textbooks and technology. Most recently, and just to give you guys an idea of what kind of money this amounts to, Hillel most recently in 2020 received $275,000 from the state. So that's $275,000 that you guys didn't pay for. And I know a lot of people say, well, if we're getting this money, then why is the tuition going down? But Hillel, as an example, and this benefits all private schools, but Hillel hasn't raised tuition in 5 years. So like I mentioned, I came from Brooklyn originally, and they raise tuition for the next 5 years already today. So, you know, we're in a very different situation in New Jersey when you compare the two states. You're going to hear a lot of money get given to New York, but the difference between what they do with that money and what they can do with that money versus New Jersey is pretty wide. New Jersey's money can go a lot longer and a lot farther for us than it can in New York. Our most recent victory was we got a history-making STEM bill passed last year, which basically has the state paying for secular teachers' salaries in science, technology, engineering, and math categories. I'm happy to announce that Hillel just now, this month, hired a teacher under this pilot program, and we now added a 9th grade biology track in the high school that teacher is being covered by the state. It's actually a better quality teacher than what we could normally be exposed to, partially because she's a member of the teachers union and she has a degree in STEM. This is not her full-time job, but the point is that the state funded $5 million for this thing, for the whole state, for all the non-public schools. There's about 150,000 non-public students. We were lucky enough to be able to pull one of these teachers out, and hopefully, if this is a success, this is the stepping stone that by 2030, our plan is to have the majority or all of our secular teachers paid for by the state. So, I'm no mathematician, but if you took out half of your operating budget of salaries off of your books, then I have to imagine that what it's going to cost to educate each student goes down. And that means that the cost that you guys have to pay to educate your students goes down. So, what we're doing here is working. It's still in its infancy, but everything that we've touched so far, the Li'ayin Hara, has worked. I've been doing this now for 5 years. Everything that we've gone to ask for has worked. So, this isn't easy. It's not terribly difficult either. There's a lot of different ways that you guys can help that really don't cost you much. Number one, register to vote. We're only as powerful to these politicians as our voting voice, as our bloc. They need us to vote. They need us to register. They don't need you necessarily to even vote for them. They just need to know that you're registered to vote because then you're important to them. Now you're a buyer. Now they want to sell you. So, if you're going to get my vote, what are you doing for my community? And then this community becomes a lot more important to them. The other thing that you can do that really costs no money is to register for Teach Coalition. By registering, you'll be notified when there's an action alert. An action alert could be as simple as a 5-second click of your information that sends an automatic letter to a senator that says, hey, you guys are trying to take out this type of funding, or we need to increase this type of funding, or thank you for increasing this type of funding. Those things go a long way. 5-second clicks. The other thing that you can do is broadcasts. Share the messages that we spread. An event like this, when you know it's happening, send it to your chat group, send it to your friends, email it out. Because the more people that know about what we're doing, obviously the more people can join and the more people will understand that, hey, this isn't just Ralph Hannon running this thing and he's got it. You can help run this thing and you got it. Every one of you guys. I'm not any different than any of you. I have no interest in politics. I hate politics. But I'm interested in money. And knowing this community, I think we're a little bit interested in money. So, we're all pretty good at getting it. Let's get more of it. It's out there for you guys, and you're paying for it. That's what you need to start understanding. You're paying for it so much. You're paying it in every tax bill. You're paying it in every paycheck. You're paying it in every single tuition bill. You're paying for it. So I think it's time that you start to take it back. The fact that Sammy didn't hear about this, and I have to give a big Fizuka, big thank you to the Mexican Pacino, Abe Manopola, because without him, honestly, he gave us a megaphone and broadcasted this, and I saw all these people cared so much about tuition. They really cared so much, but we've been doing this for 5 years and nobody knows about it. Sammy didn't even know about it, so that's on us also. Maybe we're not doing a good enough job of letting you guys know what we're doing, and that was really one of the reasons why we wanted to pull this event together, just to educate you guys, let you know what we're doing, what's out there, the money that's out there on the table, the things that you can do. And I'm not asking you guys to show up and call the governor and these are not impossible things what you need to do. We have plenty of local politicians here that honestly would love to get a call and say, hey, would you like to have a tour of the DSN here in your district? You know what I mean? And see what we're all about. And some of them have been through here, and we brought a few different elected officials into Hillel before. But you guys can also pick up the phone and introduce yourself and say, I'm from this community, I just wanted to get on your radar. And that way you have an open mic with that guy or that woman when the vote is coming up in the assembly and they need something, they think of you. They think of this community, and it works. And I'm telling you firsthand it works. Because when we needed the governor to pay attention to this STEM bill and sign it, I was able to call him, and he was like, Ralph, we know about the bill, thank you, we're checking it out, we're taking a look. Now, he's not promising Ralph Hannon, but I guarantee you when he signed that bill, he was like, this is good for Ralph too. Somewhere, because I'm there, I'm knitting him, I'm there, I'm in his face. We're doing what we need to do. But again, you don't want to do that, you want to leave that to Ralph Hannon, no problem. Register to vote. Register on May 11th, next Tuesday, for the virtual mission to Trenton. You do not have to leave your seats. You can do it on your phones. In fact, everybody take out your phones right now. Please, teachcoalition.org/join the movement. Put your name down. It will take you 5 minutes. I don't even mind if you're looking at your phones while we're talking. Take the 5 minutes, sign up for it, click the Zoom link on Tuesday. It's from 11 to 1. We're going to be meeting with legislators throughout the state to give them our spiel. You're going to be given talking points. I have to say the schools in New Jersey, all the non-public schools have signed up for this, and I'm very proud to say that Hillel was the #1, the first one to sign up for this mission. So our children are going to be learning about the type of advocacy that we're doing, and the best example is for them to see you guys do it, and you guys care about it, and you guys understand that this stuff works. And this is not about partisan politics, and that needs to get stressed, because you will get messages from me that will say, this is who we support, or we're raising money for this politician, and the fact is that we need to work with whoever it is that is in power. If they don't feel the same way that you feel about this or that, means nothing. What matters to us and this agenda is that they care about the things that we care about, and they fund the things that we care about. Now, they could be on either party that does that. The fact is, you don't even have to vote for that person. You need to register to vote for the person that you like. But at the end of the day, if I come calling that we need to support this guy because he's probably going to be the one that wins, chances are we're betting on the right horse, and we're betting on the one that's there to help us. Now, we can't be right 100% of the time, but so far we've been pretty good at who we've been supporting and how they've been supporting us. So I would encourage everybody to register to vote, register for Teach Coalition, spread the word, help us do what we do, and if you are interested in doing more, if you are interested in making relationships with politicians, if you are interested in doing any of the lobbying that we're doing in person, then absolutely get in touch, and we'd love to have you. I'm going to introduce just a little bit so you guys understand, besides the success that we've had in New Jersey, some of the things that they've managed to do in other states that can serve as a model for us. While every state operates independently and has their own thing, there are a lot of things that we can watch and we can take from those guys. So we have things on our agenda that we're looking to get: universal pre-K, tax credit scholarships. There's a whole myriad of things that we can start to go and push for. The man who helps us get those things shaped and organized is right here, Maury Litwack, who without him, there is none of this. He's the brainchild of this. He got backed by the OU to make this happen, and that's what enables us to get this done. Maury, please come. And let everybody know about the success that
Thank you, Ralph. First off, I see Mexican Pacino here, and I want to give a shout out to him because what he did with the Gunod is a big deal, and it was talked about all over the country. And I also heard that he's keeping his beard long until every woman is free, which is why my beard is long until the tuition crisis is solved. So you'll see me a year or 2 or 3 or 5 years from now, who knows how long it's going to be. 3 questions for the group. Number 1, how long have we been talking about the tuition crisis for in the Jewish world? Anyone want to take a guess? Give me a year. Any guesses out there? Give me a year. Forever. Give me a year. Any year. Give me any guesses. Anybody? 98. What do you say? 50 years, 60 years. The date was 1997. In 1997, very close. 1997. We need good swag. Jelly beans for some people do that. We did that. Reedy Kleiman, a member originally from Deal, who's on our staff. And we were working in Brooklyn for a long time. We never hired anybody in Brooklyn. So the 1997, the Federation came out with a report called the Tuition Crisis. And it was elaborate and it discussed how could we solve this growing crisis. Now, I felt this because I'm going to date myself, but I was in high school at the time, and my parents suffered from the tuition crisis. So when this was happening, I was feeling it. Now, I have 4 kids now, and I'm still feeling it, and you're feeling it. It's why you're in the room. The second question I have for you is, which other countries, are there other countries that you can name that also have a tuition crisis? Anybody? England does not have a tuition crisis. Anybody else? Tuition crisis. What about Israel? No, we know there's no tuition crisis there. Because every time anyone makes Aliyah, they have to brag to us about how they don't pay tuition anymore. So we've all heard that. Anybody else? Mexico does not have a tuition crisis. Canada has a bit of a tuition crisis depending on where you are. America is one of the only countries, well, America is the only country that has a tuition crisis. And we're going to come back to that in a second. Finally, what is the cost that New Jersey pays per student to educate a public school child? We have 30,000, 40,000. It's actually not that much, although our property taxes feel that way. It's only $22,000, $24,000 probably about this year. $22,000 to $24,000 per student. Now, the cost of tuition is not that. The cost of tuition for a kindergartner is not $22,000 to $24,000 in the local yeshiva here. Last I checked, it wasn't. So that's without providing a dual curriculum. That's without providing any Limudei Kodesh, right? That's without providing all of the things, Gemara and Chumash, and all the things that I cheated off of or slept through growing up. That's without providing all those things that we need to do and we need to give our kids. So at the end of the day, we have 3 constants here, right? We have a tuition crisis we've been talking about for 24 years. 24 years we've been talking about it. We know that we're the only country that's talking about the tuition crisis. And we know that the cost of education is $22,000 to $24,000. In New York, it's $28,000. That's a lot of money to spend. Now, these things are important and they're constant in the following ways, which is, I know there's a lot of ideas around solving the tuition crisis. I know this because no one, I believe, in the history of the Jewish world has spoken about the tuition crisis more than I have. I've spoken about it 200-300 places. I've even spoken about it in Mexico. I've spoken about it everywhere. And people have given me all kinds of ideas, and a lot of great ideas. For example, there's a big idea out there that we should all invest in a $1 billion fund. This idea emanates from a couple people, one in Chicago, one in actually California. 20 years ago, they tried to do this. It's very hard to raise $1 billion. You actually don't need $1 billion in order to support the community. In order to generate the returns from that, you need $20 billion, $40 billion, $100 billion. We care about the whole community. Do you know what it costs to educate the Jewish community in the New York, New Jersey area on an annual basis? Take a guess at what it costs to educate our kids. What? No. 2.5 billion annually. That's what it costs. Do you know how many yeshiva day school kids there are in New York and New Jersey? There's close to 200,000 and you count pre-K. 200,000 and growing. It's said in jest that in Lakewood, New Jersey, it's said in jest, but this is probably true, in Lakewood, New Jersey, Every single week, a kindergarten class is born in Lakewood, New Jersey. We're growing, we're booming. Look at Deal, look at everywhere else, we're booming entity. $2.5 billion annually. We'd have to really create quite an endowment in order to generate the kind of money we need to do that. Now, I'm not on the economical side of things. I'm not an economist, but it's a lot of money you have to do that. So that's one of the big ideas that are thrown out there. Other ideas that are out there is slash and burn, pull out, we don't like this at the school, we don't like that, etc. And I ask you, and I say this to so many audiences, why does that have to be the case? Every single person sitting here wants their child, their grandchild, their friend's child to go to the education of their choice. We know children that struggle, we know children that have more needs, and every single one of those children should be able to go to the school of their choice. So when you present to me models and you say to me, here's a cheaper model that doesn't have X, Y, and Z, is that a child going to the best education that they want? Is that a child that's going to the best education that they choose to go to? I don't think so. So I believe that we can do this, and I believe that every single child, and I think we need to imagine a world where every child has access to a strong Jewish education, where every parent is provided this in an affordable way. But in order to do this, government funding is not the solution to it, but it's an extremely important part of the problem. It's an extremely important part of the solution. You can't have any solution without government funding. And the reason why is because it costs $22,000 to $24,000 a child for the public schools to educate their children. Private schools are trying to do it. Yeshivot are trying to do that and provide Limudei Kodesh on top of that and provide it for less as well. You must understand this. You must understand that our children are our most precious commodity and they require a serious investment. So where's the money going to come from? The reason why there's no tuition crisis in places like London, in Eretz Yisrael, in other places around the world, is because the government invests in the education of every child. Every single child the government invests in. Just think about that. That's big. And it's nonsensical that the American government does not invest in our children as well. Why, when it comes to our choice, do we not have a choice? If you take food stamps, you have a choice of taking halal food stamps, kosher food stamps. If you take in the free boxes, which have been around everywhere, and I know they're here also, there's kosher boxes. Good, you should have that choice. If you have HUD housing, if you had HUD assisted housing, and you need housing, you can pick a house near a synagogue, you can pick a house near a mosque, you can pick a house near a church, etc. Only in education do we not have a choice. Only in education in America is it said to us that this is the only choice. It's public school or bust. And that's why our organization exists. Our organization is about changing the narrative and about fighting in the trenches and about fighting and making our voices heard in important places where we need to fight in order to achieve real results for our kids. 92% of all education funding in America comes out of not Congress. I worked in Congress, I know. It doesn't come out of Congress, it comes out of state and local government. 92%. Which that's big. That's where all the players are. That's where we need to be. If you want to do something big on the federal side of things, if you want to get involved in foreign affairs or foreign relations or things like this, you have to go on those. You have to go to Washington, D.C. If you want to get your tax bill done, if there's a trade issue, you have to go to Washington, D.C. In order to change the narrative, we need to go to local and state officials in Trenton. Who knows who their state senator is here? By raise of hands. It's got two. Who knows who their state assembly member is? By raise of hands. State senator here, the one who represents you. I just said 92% of education funding comes out of Trenton. Assemblymen and senators. Assemblymen and senators. Who can name me the assemblymen and senators? Take a sip.
Totally?
Yes. Yes. Yes, yes. So we got 2 out of 3. There's one more. Yes, thank you. Actually, very good. Give these guys a round of applause. Nice. So I've done that exercise in communities around the country, and it's never, we never get the answer right. But Maury, 92% of education funding comes out of those states. That's why we were formed. And we were only formed less than a decade ago because, fundamentally speaking, we need to be advocating in a much more serious way than we are. Especially in the New York, New Jersey area, where we're growing and we're growing. In New York City, I cite this all the time, 1 out of every 13 children in New York City is a yeshiva day school student. The other 12 are going to public school, charter school, etc. The 13th is going to yeshiva. So when I go to New York, I say to them, how can you not be active like that? $2.5 billion enterprise. How can we not be in Albany? How can we not know who's running for mayor? Similarly, when I say this to Jersey, we are growing by leaps and bounds, and we are going to be a force to be reckoned with. But only if we know these types of things. Only if we know who represents us. Only if we know who in Trenton represents us. But it's the potential for us to do things is gigantic, as Ralph was saying. We have offices in Florida, in Pennsylvania, in Maryland, in California, in New York, New Jersey. 90% of the yeshiva day school world we represent. In Florida, 1 out of every 4 students is on scholarship paid for by government tax credits. 1 out of every 4 students. In Pennsylvania, go drive to Pennsylvania. In some areas, 70 to 80% of the children are on scholarship paid for by the government. The government makes up, in some of those states, 25, 30, 40% of their budget. You know what it makes up here in New Jersey? What's the number? 2%? Maybe. Look at that. Look at how sad everyone is. Look at how sad that's making Ralph Hannon. Who wants to make Ralph Hannon sad? What a good guy. 2%. 2%. I said $22,000. You know what we're getting? Not talking about the STEM teachers. You know what we're getting per pupil in New Jersey? $500, kid? $550? The number says over here. Non-public schools represent 10% of New Jersey. We receive less than 1% of the state funding. 10%, 1%. What other business would accept that? We're 10%, but we receive less than 1% of the funding. That's what we're up against. That's what we're here tonight to talk about. Every dollar that comes from the government is a dollar that isn't you're not investing, that we're not raising money for, and that is going back into our community. And you can, not only is it good for education, but now you can raise that money for other important causes and things that we need in the community.
What percentage of the 10% is Jewish schools?
It's
50 out of the 150.
Yeah, it's a little over 50, and we're going to exceed it. In New York already, the Jewish students.
The non-public schools in New Jersey.
There's 150,000 non-public school students. About 50,000 of them are Jewish. A third.
Yeah. In New York, we already exceed the Catholic population. Our students exceed the Catholic population, which only happened over the last 3-4 years. In New York,
there's a big difference that they need. The Catholic school business is going out of business.
17 schools closed this year.
And I'll tell you why that we're a little bit unique from them is because they don't have these communities that we have. They don't have these networks that we have. They don't have the donors that we have, and they don't have the people who care. You know, the Catholic Church has more real estate and money than anybody else in the world. You'd think that they'd be bailing out their own schools. They don't have that. We don't have a centralized government either, but we have us, and we have our ability to do these things, and we don't always have to come out of pocket to do them. Like Maury's saying, get to know who your mayor is, get to know who your senator is. I see Darren here who works on behalf of Hillel. I'm sure he's got to know the right people in order to get the things that they need to get done. So everybody needs to start making these relationships and understanding who these people are and voting for these people, because they are the keys for us. They really are.
If you look at what we're trying to achieve in New Jersey right now, as Ralph mentioned, imagine if we were able to get the science teachers all paid for by the state, the math teachers paid for. Not only is it good for our kids, considering the fact that the STEM jobs, I think there's some sort of crazy study that like 60% of the jobs don't exist right now. They're going to be, you literally need those skills. They're desperately, I can tell you the yeshiva I went to, it took me like 3 years to graduate from algebra. So I can tell you that I did not get those STEM subjects. So not only is it good for our kids, and it's about providing that great education, but imagine if we were able to do that. When we started this effort 4 or 5 years ago, and it was people like Sammy Saka and Ralph and others in the community, people thought we were crazy. What do you mean you're going to get blue states to pay for the secular instruction? in our schools. That was the dream. How could you possibly do that? The way we went about this and the way we pulled this off is because we had what I would consider a professional inside game, which is the same way we looked at this as we would your business, which is if you had a government problem or a government issue, you call up lawyers, say, what should I do? The lawyers are going to first bill you for it, and then they're going to tell you you should hire a lobbyist, because the lawyers aren't going to be able to resolve it for you. That's what we did. We hired some of the best political minds that you could hire. The same people who worked for casinos, worked for pharma, worked for AT&T, they took our work, which we had to convince them because you know, they weren't used to working with like Jewish clients and nonprofits, and it made them
It's not as sexy as Uber.
It's not, yeah, exactly, Uber and things like that. But anyway, we hired the best. We treated it the same way, and we said we have this $2 billion enterprise. And over the last 5-6 years in New York and New Jersey, what we did fundamentally changed things in order for us to pass the policies and bills. What we did were things like hiring lobbyists for the very first time, which had not been done by the community, even though it's a $2 billion plus enterprise. If your company's worth $10 million and it's getting bullied by the government, you hire a lobbyist. We did this for the first time. We brought people to Albany. If you talk to Mag and David, you talk to Flatbush, you talk to Barkai, you talk to YDE, you talk to a Tarrant, every single one of those schools will tell you that they've been with me to Albany. They've heard me screaming in Albany because this is something worth screaming about, and they've screamed as well, and they've been passionate to their politicians. But we started, I remember speaking in Hathaway where we were trying to pitch people in the summertime, and we had like 12 people who came to Albany. The next year we had 600 people, probably at least 200 just from the Sephardic community in Brooklyn. So people heard us and they stepped up and they made their representative voices there. But like Ralph was saying, people did other things. They got to know their local elected officials. They got to understand the talking points we're talking about. They showed them this type of stuff, that 10%, but we only get 1%. And we started to change the narrative in a big way and change the game. The potential is astronomical. It's like what is in Pennsylvania or Florida. Can we get tax credits? Can we get universal pre-K? Can we get the full STEM education and other things paid for? I think we can. I think we can. I think in 5 to 10 years we can make these things happen. But it could take 15 years. It could take 20. It could take 25.
It'll happen a lot quicker if people start to help do it.
Communities don't vote. Communities aren't interested in the work that this takes, the relationships you need with elected officials, the telling your community members. In the last election, raise a hand, I'm assuming everyone voted, big election, general election? Okay, great. People remember voting in last year's state primaries? Somewhat? You know, in Jersey, by the way, there's like an election every 3-4 months here. There's literally an election in Jersey. I'm not from Jersey.
June.
In June, there's an election. Are people aware there's an election in June? Yes, excellent. If we as a community make this issue the #1 issue that we talk to our elected officials about, something we're passionate about, something we show up to Trenton about, something that we talk to them about locally, something that we vote on, something that we care about, it won't be 10 years, it won't be 5 years, we'll start to make change in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, etc. But if we don't, we won't be successful. And politicians are counting on us not to be successful at this.
What percentage of the education in each township does the state pay for, as opposed to the townships themselves?
It depends. There's a
Every township here, I mean.
right, but that's 100%. But that's another piece of it. The townships are never going to allocate money to the non-public schools. It's never going to happen. It has to come from Trenton. So even though there's a percentage there, you have to get the money from Trenton because the local township's never going to do it.
Okay, but
It's
how much does Trenton,
in the last few years, Trenton's increased, I think, by 15 or 20%. The actual amount percentage, I think, it depends on the school district area. So I have to find out. I was going to say that in politics, they're saying, and I'll end with this, which is, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. That's it. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. If we don't vote, if we don't care about these issues, if we don't get ourselves exercised and passionate about these things in a serious way, there are lots of elected officials who are thrilled about this because they're just going to give the money to somebody else. They're just going to hope we go away. They're just going to hope our community, we ignore our community and go from there. So with that, I hope people are active. I hope people get engaged in these issues, but I hope people have questions about this. It's a tough issue, it's a difficult issue, and I'll just close with the following thing before we take questions. In a survey that was published a couple years back, the community was polled on the number one issue in the community. The number one issue. There's a lot of issues, a lot of things, right? Shidduchim and family drama, all kinds of things, right? The number one issue, 97% of the community of Orthodox Jewish respondents said that the tuition crisis was their number one issue. 97%. If you leave this room today, ask yourself this question, and ask people on Shabbat, do we put in 97% type of effort in this issue? That's how we have to think about this issue. And so I'll close with the following, which is, this may be a great way for you to be involved and engaged. There may be other opportunities. You may go speak to the local yeshivot, raise more money, get more involved out there. There's other things that you can do. But if I leave you with one thing, which is that let's not wait another 24 years for real movement on this issue. Together, B'ezrat Hashem, we could do amazing things if we unite as a community, if we have that achdut, if we really work together. And I think if we do that, in 24 years from now, those generations will say, once upon a time, they sat in a room, probably just because they were thrilled to get inside during COVID. Once upon a time, they sat in a room and they made something happen. And it was small actions to them, but it was a big, big result for us in the future. Thank you all.
Thank you, Maury. That was great. See, it's that type of passion that's going to get this done. Now, I want you to go and give every single one of these people a little dose of it and make sure that they get involved. I just want to say one other thing for you guys so you understand when he's talking about there's plenty of politicians who would love nothing more than to take that money away from us. That has happened to us. Right when we stepped into this gig, right when I stepped into this gig, they threw me into testifying before the Assembly Budget Committee in Trenton because they struck our security from the budget. They just zeroed it out. And they made us come, and we had to lobby and explain why we needed security funding. So I was only a parent. I wasn't involved in doing any of this, and that's really kind of what started here. I came as a parent, and I said, well, I had all the facts of how many terrorist organizations live in New Jersey, how many white supremacists, how many acts of violence happened, and I had to explain to them that my children are targets every single day strictly because they have a yarmulke on their head. So when politicians start to hear from people, and not only lobbyists, and they start to humanize a lot of these issues and understand them and equate them to the people that they know, then their mindset changes, their perspective changes in how they approach these things. So it works. Let's take some questions. Anybody have anything? So in first, yeah, she got a mic.
If the government's funding our secular curriculum, could they dictate, is secular education, could they dictate the curriculum?
I'll let you take that one.
No.
I was going to say it, but he got up. Yes, in the back. Sorry. Nancy Laura.
I came a little late, I don't know if you talked about this, but what did you accomplish until now? Because
Get out.
5 years. No, I
We put her in charge. What's her name? Sarah. We put Sarah in charge.
We doubled our security funding. We passed a history-making STEM bill that we now have at least one of our teachers being paid for by the state for science. The plan is by 2030 to have all of our secular teachers paid for by the state. But since I've been involved, I think we were getting $50,000 at Hillel, and last year we got $275,000, and that's not because of me, that's because of us. So, it's not because of me, it's because of us, it's because of everybody, it's because of the parents like you guys that are in Bergen County, and they're in Cherry Hill, and Teaneck, and everywhere else. And they're doing all this already. They're kind of ahead of us, to be honest with you, as far as communities go. At the Brooklyn community, our communities are, they're the leaders in New York. But in New Jersey, we're honestly, second to last on the list in terms of activism. I'm the most active guy here. I'm out of shape, so we need help.
By the way, I just came here tonight to replace Ralph. That was really my goal.
So, yes.
how active are the non-public schools in this whole thing? The
The
Catholic
non-Jewish?
schools? The non-yeshivas.
So, to be honest with you, we lead the way. We're the most active, and we work to engage them, because no politicians, it's one of their first questions. They don't want to only help the Jews, you know what I mean? You need to show them that this isn't only helping the Jews, this is helping non-public schools in terms of not just religious-oriented non-public schools, special needs schools. There's a lot of different things that qualify as a non-public school. So, they're active, but we by far run the show. I mean, we're the...
But what is the plan to engage all these schools, and how are we going to go about that? Because with numbers...
Yeah, 100%. In New York proper, we're very proud of the fact that the STEM bill that we led the way on in terms of advocating for it, which we were the only group, we had no support from any other coalition group on it, which was reimburses yeshivot in New York for the cost of their science, technology, engineering, and math teachers. We're very proud of the fact that it's now up to $40 million, of which a little under half goes to the Catholic schools. So actually, I like to call myself the biggest contributor to Catholic education in New York. But the facts are the facts is that I think from a policy perspective, from a grassroots perspective, and a changing the way this is done, which is, I think most of the other faith groups and non-public schools are treating this the way we treated it, which is basically like, well, we choose to pay for education, and so if we choose to pay for education, the government doesn't have to do it. That is wrong. There is no other choice for us. Jewish education is what our kids need, and so that's where we're sending our children, and so the government has to understand that and has to care and invest in every child. And so when we speak to Catholic parents, or when we speak to non-public schools in general, they have the same approach, the same passion as we do. We've been able to galvanize it into more of a grassroots movement, whereas I would say it was more grass tops heavy, as I described earlier. So we are including them, we are engaging with them, and every piece of legislation we do does not benefit just the Jewish day schools and yeshiva. It doesn't.
Right, but I know in Monmouth County as a whole, there's a lot of non-yeshiva schools. There's a lot of Catholic schools.
So I think that if people in this room, if you join the movement and you want to be active in things, that is an example of something that we want you active in, which is we want people who are willing to go talk to the other coalition partners.
Are you volunteering? We'll talk about it on Shabbat. Yes. We'll have to, that's a trickier thing. We're going to have to get to that when we get a little bit closer.
Morning, first of all, thank you for all your efforts. Thank Ralph, thank you for everything you do on our event. You do it really good work. I just wanted to make a quick point. When you throw the numbers out, like 28,000 New York, 22,000 New Jersey, those are public school numbers. Public school budgets, I think the numbers like 30 to 40% are comprised of teacher benefits, meaning union, pensions, healthcare, that most of our yeshiva staff don't get. So I don't think it's a fair gauge, and I'm not telling you to combat it, I'm telling you as a talking point through Trenton to Albany, it's not that much to educate our kids. So that being said, don't you feel that right now there are 18 states plus Washington, D.C. that have voucher programs, official voucher programs. Don't you feel that that is ultimately the solution to our problem, getting New York and New Jersey onto a voucher system?
The problem with vouchers, and most people don't understand this, is that vouchers almost universally are means tested, which means that you have to have an income of a certain level in order to qualify for the voucher. So there's an idea of the vouchers that the government would send you a check, and then you get the check and you just spend it wherever you want. But in practicality, if you look at those 19 states, the super majority of them have means testing, which means, I think for some of them, it's if you're making 200% above the FPL, which is the federal poverty level, you'll get that. And in order to do that, let's say you have 4 kids, in order to qualify for the voucher, you'd have to be making, you can't make more than about $100,000 or $95,000. So that's what these vouchers look like if they were ever rolled out in New Jersey, which wouldn't help us.
Well, maybe if they did it after tuition.
Exactly.
More realistic is a tax credit.
Right. So in Pennsylvania, you have tax credits, which are tax credits incentivize donations to a scholarship fund. So for example, corporation can say, I'm going to donate $1 million, and they'll give them a 90% tax credit, which means now they only owe $100,000 to the state, and that $1 million can go to the Sephardic scholarship fund of Deal.
We have a lot of corporations.
Right, so the point is that there are other ways to do it. In blue states, it's vouchers are a 4-letter word. It'll never happen in blue states.
Washington, D.C. is the blues.
Washington, D.C. had it. When I was in Congress, I was part of the group that passed that, and they passed it because Congress forced them to do it under a Republican administration. That's the only reason it happened. It didn't happen because there's a lot of opposition to it from teachers union, from a lot of other groups, etc. But it's a pipe dream. It won't happen. At the end of the day, we look at things when the teacher's coming into Hillel, and it's a math teacher. That teacher is not only is the school not paying it for the teacher, but they're also not paying for the benefits either. So we think that if you take security off, if you take nursing off, if you take technology off, if you take the secular education off, now you start to take off big wings of budgetary costs from the schools. But vouchers are just never going to happen in New York and New Jersey. It's just politically not viable.
It sounds like he knows a lot about this issue. I think we could use him in Trenton. Just get armed to work for us and make our arguments, not theirs.
By the way, Ralph
But like I said, back to my other point, that the 28,000 number is a high inflated number based on a public school bureaucracy right with fraud. Our costs are much less. That should be your talking point.
100%. They should be our talking point. They should be our talking point. And when parents or grandparents go to Trenton or have conversations where they explain to them how they struggle with tuition or their friends struggle, or how people are making choices about how large their families are because of tuition, or how grandparents are still in debt and can't retire because of tuition, and if you tell these stories to elected officials, they are more persuasive than simply the facts on the ground. And more like telling them, I live in Teaneck, it's really irrelevant for me telling it as opposed to you telling it. They expect a guy like me to come in there with the facts and figures and the numbers and things like that. When they hear from our students, and they hear from you, and they hear you speaking, and they hear Ralph Hannon, who's literally a volunteer, I can tell you how many times he's missed work in order to go deal with this stuff, that speaks to them. This is either a moment in time, or it's a movement. It's up to our community.
Thank you very much, Maureen, for everything that you're doing. Question for you would be, you've had some moderate success in New York, right? Teach NYS, you've had some moderate success there, and been able to get some funding from the local government there. But it doesn't seem to have helped people's tuitions in those yeshivas in Brooklyn. So the question would be, how is it going to be different here in Deal in New Jersey? How is it going to be different here versus Brooklyn yeshivas? They keep on raising the prices even though they've gotten some funding. How's that going to be different here?
We're much better than that. No, really, I'll tell you why. Because, first of all, we operate a little differently than them. Number one, we're much smaller. We have, for the most part, all intents and purposes, one main school. That one school takes 50% of the community school's state budget. So we're a little bit more hyper-focused where we are. But the biggest difference between these two schools and between these two communities, and I don't know if we're going to get heat from Brooklyn people after this on the board, but Flatbush and Mag and David, those boards don't raise any money. They build in the scholarship fund for their schools, which is sizable because their enrollment is much bigger than ours, into everybody's tuition. Hillel doesn't do that. We raise all of our scholarship money, the board goes out, and the parents go out, and we raise over $2 million a year in order to disperse that scholarship money. So that enables us to not put the onus on everybody and their tuition bill. It keeps us going back to the cost of what it really costs to educate. It's about between $12,000 and $15,000. That's why Hillel's tuition is closer to that number of what it costs to educate than the schools in Brooklyn and New York and in Brooklyn, who are closer to that $28,000 number. And like you said, they don't have any of those pensions or any of those things. So the key difference there is the fact that we put the onus on the board and the parents to go raise that scholarship funding versus building it in for everybody else.
I have another answer. If the government funding ends tomorrow in Brooklyn or New York, the schools have to charge another $2,000 a kid. That's simply the math. The money is not invisible money. It doesn't just disappear. It goes into providing good security, STEM, things like that. But also, frankly, we have to do a better job. We have to generate more money and keep up and do that and keep up with the cost of tuition, cost of education. And the other thing I'm going to say is I'm not Santa Claus, which is we can generate government funding. We can crack the door open. If I came here tonight and said to you, here's my potential policy goal, join me on that, that's one thing. I already got people who did that for me and had a crazy ride with us to pull it off. I'm here to say we pulled it off. The proof of concept is over. We generate the funding. You figure out how the best to do that. There's going to be schools and parents who say, now I can do more of this. There's going to be ones who say I can keep tuition here. That's your problem. I'm not Santa Claus. Like, I can't just deliver the money and then make it all appear and happen. If you're involved in that discussion, if you're involved in that in communities, you can make a powerful difference. But going back to what I said originally, this is about making sure that what we have is better, is sustainable, and things like that. But yeah, I don't think there's any promises when it comes to that. At the end of the day, what I can show you is I can show you a ledger, and I can show you the money, the external money that we can get for that ledger to make a meaningful difference. Which in some cases, they may lower tuition. In some cases, they may increase tuition. In some cases, tuition may be the same. In some cases, education is going to be a lot better. In some cases, it won't be. In some cases, you're going to have more special services. In some cases, you won't have special services. Where I used to live in Maryland, I paid $2,000 a kid for my kids to go on the bus. Now I live in Teaneck, I don't pay $2,000 a kid to go on the bus. So I just think the way we think about these things is extremely important.
Has it or has it not been an effective tactic to get everybody together and threaten to sign up for the public schools? You've heard a lot about that, but I really never know what to believe with that. So what's the truth behind that?
There's a more effective tool than that.
So, in New York, what they did was when Bloomberg was the mayor, he had a clever answer, which I think is still pretty consistent, which was we have buses, which means you can't scare us. You're not going to go to PS 216 or the one on Avenue S or over here. We'll shift you to the Bronx. Here, they tried to do that, I think, when they first moved to New Jersey, and all they say is, okay, we welcome it. Come and do it.
But in reality,
if you did it,
400 kids signed up for Ocean Township schools.
Yes,
next year. They're not wrapping a brick. I mean,
no, they'll figure it out with the other districts that they partner with and they work with. So your kid might end up in Neptune. Your kid might end up in Asbury. They won't. You'll see how quickly they widen all the strictures in terms of zoning and where your kid could go to school the minute that happens. They're not afraid of it. They would tell you, bring it on, we'll figure it out. You're paying taxes, you live in the state, you have every right to join the school.
If you have a more effective technique, there's two more effective things you can do. Number one is you can tell them about all your friends who are moving to Florida, which is true. So you can tell them about everybody who's moving to Florida or moving to other places. Lots of people are. And the second thing you can do that's extremely effective is, could you imagine our community if there was an anti-Israel candidate running for office or someone who represented this community who was anti-Israel? You would do everything in your power to make sure they were not elected. That's what people would do. Let's just be honest with ourselves. We have, in state after state, elected officials who, there are lots who are literally anti our issues, and then others are just apathetic about it. Rather than threatening that, you could say, our community cares about these issues, and you're going to be hearing from us. And that's very, very powerful for elected officials, but right now, it's not happening, not just here, but not in Passaic, not in Lakewood, not in other places. The politicians don't feel this. And if they just feel our voices and feel us consistently being there, it's a difference maker. In New York City, I've never seen the mayoral candidates react to the yeshiva issue the way they had this year, and that's a credit to the people in Brooklyn, it's a credit to people in the 5 towns and others, the activists who were at forums like this, signed up and put their money where their mouth was and started to become active in it.
Another question for you. Obviously, activism, getting people out there to Trenton, has an impact. So why doesn't a school like Hillel, for instance, say, okay, March 22nd, we're taking 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, we're taking everybody a day off from school, and we're taking all the children straight to Trenton, bring 500, 600, 800 kids from one yeshiva, and show the power. Why are we doing that?
Tuesday, May 11th, 11 to 1 p.m. It's actually virtual because of COVID, but we are doing that. Thank you. I hope you're going to be on it. 11 to 1, Tuesday. Did we not say that already? May 11th, 11 to 1. We are doing exactly what that kid just asked me to do. Okay? Thank you.
Quick response.
How many people are you expecting?
Teachcoalition.org/join the movement.
By the way, it's a virtual mission. That's a great question. It's a virtual mission. 45, 50,000 yeshiva kids. I don't know how many people are yeshiva parents or grandparents in the state of New Jersey. How many people we have signed up?
600 between
Only
students and parents.
600 between students and everything. Ah, killer. I've spoken all over the state. I'm getting 600 people. Again.
Virtual?
Virtual. 600 people. In New York, I think I got 700, 800 people. Virtual. 600 people. Maury, solve the tuition crisis for us now. Do it now. It's the #1 issue for us.
Okay,
I'm
join
busy.
this link.
I'm busy. I can't put that link up while I'm doing it. I can't. We're busy. 97% of the community said it's the #1 issue in 97%. Where are we on it?
Tell us about what happened when you, on May 11th. May 11th. You hit the Zoom, you hit the link, and what happened? What do you do? Nothing. What else are your responsibilities?
So,
Greenie, climb in.
come stand over here.
May 11th, between 11 and 12, there will be a program with our leadership and a lot of our elected officials. Actually, Vin Gopal, who is the senator in this area, will be speaking as well. And then we actually pair our students and our parents and everyone that's involved with an elected official, and then between 12 and 12:30, they actually have the opportunity to speak to them and talk about our issues. So we have a packet that has all of our talking points that we're sending out. Our parents and our students are getting it. They're getting lunch, they're getting swag at school, and this is the opportunity for... What?
The deadline to register was May 4th.
We'll extend it, don't worry. But again, between 12 and 12:30, you have the opportunity to sit in a room, in a virtual room, with a representative and talk about these issues throughout the state. And then we close, Governor Murphy's going to be speaking, and then we have that push to have everyone to get more involved. So we look forward to seeing you all there.
No excuse.
Take one last question.
Okay. Any more questions? Last one.
Is it $180 to go on the thing?
No, it's free.
No,
Yeah, it's
I didn't know that part.
I think it's
I signed up for free, sorry.
The fee should be removed if you want to get.
I agree.
More people.
Kind of
I
agree.
get it.
Now you know I got 600
We
people.
will be sending out a coupon code to everyone that signs up and joins the movement tonight.
Coupon code for
We have a
everyone who
coupon
signs
code.
up. Okay. Guys, thank you very much. Just so you guys know, the state senator and the assembly people who sponsored the initial push to double our security funding, as well as the state senator and the assembly people who sponsored the bill for the STEM bill, which put them in the line of fire with the teachers union, were all our local officials. Vin Gopal, Eric Hoteling, and Joanne Downey all have an office right here on West Park Avenue. Those three people stood up before the Assembly and the Senate for our community strictly because we reached out to them, and we got to know them, and they got to know us, and they came to Hillel, and they came to Sandy Shalom's house, and they came so they came to shuls, and they got to know our community. So if you think that it doesn't work, it works. We are getting money right now from these guys. I mean, this is how it works. So I believe in everybody here. I believe in everybody that you know. So I think that you guys can help just by spreading the word. You came to this event, you signed up for this thing, you want somebody else to, you don't want to bounce $180, get the coupon code, vote, register to vote. There's a lot of other free things you can do also. All right, guys? And if you want a free one, then get involved and we'll hook you up.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.